Hi, I'm Stephen Marks, and I'm here to show you why rock and roll is by far the highest form of popular music in the history of popular music. And I'm going to show it using just a piano, which might seem strange. Because the thing that gets overlooked with rock music is how great the melodies are. If you go through popular music in American history, just for instance, you started with folk music, and then jazz, country music, and then blues, and then rock. Each of those venues before rock lasted maybe 5 to 10, 15 years in their heyday. While rock and roll, it'll be almost 70 years. If you look at the top 10 albums of all time, 9 of them are rock albums. If you look at all the albums that sold 200 million copies or more, something like 60 out of 80 of them are rock. So clearly, there's something superior about rock music. Maybe it's because for the first time you have the artists are also the writers, which wasn't the case before Chuck Berry, and now is the case with most rock musicians, a lot of singer-songwriters too. Anyway, I'm going to show you right here, right now, on the piano, how I can show your guests a way to hear rock music as they've never heard it before, because I'm going to focus completely on, there's nothing to focus on with the piano but the melody. Strip it of everything. I know rock music, we think of the beat is what made it so big, but the melody is what has kept it popular for the last 70 years. And I'm going to give you several examples, just very short snippets. You may have already seen my album, The Beatles' Haunting Melodies, which has 25 Beatle melodies, just focusing on the melodies. I'm going to do some other tunes by some other classic rock artists to show you the same thing, that the melodies of rock music are superior. I'm going to start off with Pink Floyd. This is from Dark Side of the Moon, Brain Damage. I'm sure you've all heard it. But again, you're going to hear rock music in a way you've never heard it before. Thank you. That's just a short snippet from the beginning, which is what I'm going to be doing here. That last song, Brain Damage, it goes into the very fine line between sanity and insanity. It's a very, very interesting lyric written by Roger Waters, but that's another story. I want to welcome you, I forgot to mention, I'd be remiss not to tell you, we're here at the Renaissance Cleveland Hotel, where the Beatles did their first big interview after the Ed Sullivan Show. I'm going to continue with Led Zeppelin, Stairway to Heaven. By the way, we never even got to the melody there. That's just the intro, so you can imagine what this, well, you all know what the song sounds like. But again, it's the melody that makes this rock song arguably the greatest rock song of all time. So beautiful and so perfect. I'm going to continue with the Mamas and the Papas from Summer of Love, California Dreamin'. When they first came to New York, the Mamas and the Papas, they were used to LA weather, and it was so cold there. The lyric talks about this. They had to go into a church to get warm and make believe they were praying. Kind of the flip side of Billy Joel going from New York to LA, becoming famous in LA, and being so homesick for New York, he wrote New York State of Mind. It's just kind of an interesting history behind the tune. I'm going to continue with the Eagles. Two of the top 10 albums of all time are the Eagles' Greatest Hits and Hotel California. And the Eagles' Greatest Hits, you can make the argument, sold so well because of Hotel California, really encapsulates the whole debauchery of the 1970s better than any tune, which is why it's such a great and historic song. Once again, it's these melodies that makes rock music so great. Just as good as anything written by George Gershwin or Cole Porter or Irving Berlin, any of the great songwriters, Richard Rodgers. I'm going to continue with, have to throw a Beatle tune in there since I did release the Beatles' Haunting Melodies, which you'll be able to see highlights of it on the same email that you received with this video. This is the Beatles' Norwegian Wood. Again, it's the melody there. Just an interesting aside, when John Lennon wrote that, he got stuck in the very last line. He couldn't figure out the lyric. So Paul wrote about, I lit the fire, isn't a good Norwegian wood. The lyric is about John having an affair with this young lady, but in the lyric he made believe he had to sleep in the bathroom because he didn't want his wife to know about it. But Paul didn't know that. He really thought the girl made him sexually frustrated because he had to sleep in the bath. So the line, I lit the fire, isn't a good Norwegian wood, in Paul's mind, he got so mad that he couldn't have sex with her that he burned the house down. It's a true story. Continuing with the Doors from their first album, Crystal Ship. Interesting how Jim Morrison would write a song and he'd hear it in his head, the words and the music together, but he didn't know anything about chord changes. He wasn't a trained musician, but those other three Doors were great musicians. They put in those very sophisticated, almost classical sounding chord changes. They had such a chemistry, they knew exactly what to play along with Morrison's words and melodies. Can't talk about rock and roll without mentioning the Rolling Stones, of course. This is when Keith Richard was going into rehab for heroin addiction, and he wrote a love song to heroin, saying goodbye to heroin, which was the biggest love of his life, but he knew he had to leave heroin. So he made it into a love song, and he called heroin Angie. hope you've enjoyed it. Just trying to make the point. The main appeal of rock music and why it's lasted 70 years as opposed to the other genres has been something that's just overlooked, continues to be overlooked. The melodies are just as good, if not better, superior to the melodies of any other genre of popular music. And this is something your guests would love to hear, and it would make them appreciate rock and roll on a different level, different context than they've ever heard before. They're going to be hearing rock music if they've never heard it before. Thank you.